Jacob deGrom is the best fit for the Rangers in free agency. On today's show, I'm breaking down why he makes the most sense for the Rangers, why he is absolutely worth the massive risk that it could be, and why the Rangers should not be hesitant to give him all of the money in the entire world. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Friday, November 18th. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Before we get into the greatness of Jacob deGrom, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, Jacob deGrom is the best pitcher in all of baseball when he is on the mound for the last 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 years. And it is not particularly close. This guy is absolutely astounding, and there should not be a debate over whether or not he should be the Rangers' first choice in free agency. I really like Carlos Rodon. He is a really good pitcher. He had a fantastic season. He was healthier and has been healthier the last couple of years than Jacob deGrom has. But that recency bias should not overlook what Jacob deGrom has done when he's been healthy as of late. You look at some of his numbers from this past season. If you look at baseball, if you want to see something downright erotic, downright disgusting, do not look at this on your work computer, because you will be flagged for the filth that it is. Just, you see 100s, 98, 99, everything this guy is being measured on, he is one of the best in baseball. You look at his strikeout rate, literally the best in baseball. His walk rate, top 1% of baseball. Same with his whiff rate. His fastball velocity is in the top 1% of just how fast it goes. Not to mention, you look at the spin rate, it's in the top 3% of baseball. So not only is it incredibly fast, but it is moving as well with ridiculous movement on something that is already averaging 98 miles an hour. He is pretty much a 2-pitch pitcher with the fastball there. It averages 99 miles an hour. Didn't mean to take that away from him. And he also throws a slider, which averages 93 miles an hour. Averages on his slider, which he throws 40% of the time. He also got a changeup that's 92 miles an hour, because that's 7 miles an hour off his fastball. So yeah, it's just changeup he uses about 8% of the time, and the curveball at 83. Just whenever he wants to throw something just a little bit different, change of pace, he throws that about 4% of the time. Like, all right, yeah, not everything I throw is 95 with some crazy movement, even though a lot of it is. But he's also got that curveball in his back pocket. He has just been brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Look at what he did this past year. Not his best year, but still a really darn good year. Didn't start until about halfway through the season. In 11 starts, he had 64 innings, 102 strikeouts, just 8 walks. I tell you, he got 8 walks, and he had 9 home runs. He had fewer walks than he gave up home runs, which he didn't give up a whole lot of home runs either. Had a 3.08 ERA, which is the highest his ERA has been since 2017. Back when he was a 29-year-old, he had a 3.5 ERA, which, by the way, that year where he had a 3.5 ERA, 239 strikeouts, and 200 innings, that was probably the worst year of his career when he's been healthy. A 3.5. Absolutely insane. This guy, for his career, he has pitched in the big leagues for 9 seasons. He has 209 starts under his belt, a 2.50 ERA for his entire career. That's the average. The average year is a 2.50 ERA, 1,300 innings, 10.9 strikeouts per 9, 2.1 walks per 9, less than a home run per 9 innings. This guy strikes everybody out. He doesn't walk anybody. He doesn't give up any home runs. He doesn't give up any hits. He gives up nothing. Zilch. Zero. Absolutely bare bones. Nothing. every single time out. And it is just phenomenally impressive to watch him throw a baseball, because he throw that baseball real good. He throw it real good. I tell you what, if you haven't seen him throw a baseball, boy, howdy, you should see him throw a baseball. If you haven't seen anybody throw a baseball like this guy does it, it is just unreal. He pitches deep into games. He is economical, which is with his pitch count, which is something you don't always see guys who have these big strikeout numbers. Sometimes they have some difficulty going deeper into games. deGrom is not one of those. It's just he does everything well, and it should not be fair for someone to be this good. He is a little bit on the older side. He turned 34 in June of this year. He is a former 9th round draft pick back in 2010 out of Stetson University. I don't know how the Mets stumbled into this guy being as amazing as he was. He just kind of found an insane amount of velo late on in his career. He's won 2 Cy Youngs. Probably, I honestly, if in 2021 when he had the phenomenal 1.08, I think, ERA for that year, even though he only pitched 15 games and 92 innings, I still might have voted him. If I had a vote, I think I might have voted him number 1 in Cy Young voting last year, despite him only going 92 innings. Like that's how insanely good he was last year. He had a 1.08 ERA, and it didn't even get above 1 until his final 2 starts of that season. By the way, in those final 2 starts, he went 7 innings in both of them, allowed 3 runs and 2 runs, and one of them was against the Braves where he allowed 3 runs. He struck out 15. The next one, his final start, he went 7 innings, allowed 2 runs, 4 hits, no walks in either of those, and struck out 10 against the Brewers, both playoff teams that year. And that raised his ERA above 1 for the first time that entire season. Does that not freaking break your brain? On July 7th, his ERA didn't get above 1 until that. He was shut down for the year. Coming up, we're going to get into what some of the injuries have been these past couple years, why there is a little cause for concern, but also a reason to take that risk. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you are feeling that, I think they have some odds on the Rangers getting Jacob deGrom. I know they have odds out there on where Aaron Judge goes if it is not back to the Yankees. The Rangers have decent odds on there. So if you think the Rangers are going to miss out on deGrom and maybe miss out on Rodon and want to throw a whole heck of a lot of money at somebody, and you think that somebody is Aaron Judge, you can go throw your money there at BetOnline. If you're feeling like betting on the Cowboys against, I believe they play the Vikings this week, if you're feeling confident about that, BetOnline is a great place to go do that. Look at the latest lines, see if you're feeling the Cowboys, if they are, going to keep it close, maybe bet on them to lose by just a little or to win. I don't know, but you can go check it out. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, let's take a look at what these injuries have been the last couple of years, because he has missed a significant amount of time. This year, Jacob deGrom did not pitch until August. He only threw 64 and a third innings this year. He only threw 92 innings last year. And a lot of people were pointing to 2020 and saying, oh, well, he didn't pitch 100 innings that year. Yeah, dinguses. Nobody did. Remember, there was a pandemic. It kind of changed some stuff. Baseball didn't happen a whole lot until late on in the year. He pitched 68 innings that year in 12 starts, a 2.38 ERA, finished 3rd in Cy Young voting. And oh, by the way, he had 104 strikeouts in those 68 innings in that year. So, yeah, that led all of, I believe, the National League and maybe all of Major League Baseball. And yeah, he was healthy that year. But the last 2 years, he has not been healthy. This year, he had a stress reaction in his shoulder during spring training that caused him to miss a lot of time, did not pitch until August 2nd. That was a pretty concerning injury. Shoulder injuries are always a little bit of a red flag. You have to worry a little bit about that and think, okay, well, how healthy is he really? Is that something that's going to flare up next year? If so, he is going to be 35 for the majority of next year. So how is his body going to hold up? I'll give you that he does not have a huge workload for a guy who has been as dominant as he has been. I mean, He didn't get his major league call-up until age 26. That year he pitched 140 innings, but he's been fairly durable, pitching at least 140 innings, well, over 190 innings from every year except for 2016. That year he did miss some time. Where'd we go? Due to, in 2016, he had some elbow injuries that kept him out for a few days there. But other than these last 2 years, he's been pretty darn healthy. He missed time in 2019, 11 days due to an elbow issue. He missed 8 days in 2018 due to an elbow issue. But for the most part, he's been really, really healthy for his career. Last year, he did miss significant time. There was a slight UCL tear, according to Sandy Alderson. He said that on September 9th. And then that same day, deGrom said his UCL was perfectly fine. So maybe there was a little bit of Metsing. Maybe he wasn't as hurt as everyone else thought, or maybe he was healthy. Maybe the Mets were saving him from himself. I don't know, but it feels like a very Metsian situation. They said he could have come off the injured list at the end of the year, but they were eliminated from playoff contention, so I thought, why bother risking it? He's not going to help us make the playoffs if we are already eliminated. So let's keep him healthy and just go ahead and sit him for the rest of this year. But the stress reaction in his shoulder, that is a little bit worrying. And, you know, the recency bias says, oh, well, Carlos Rodon was healthy this year for the entire year. So therefore, for all time, forever, in perpetuity, he is going to be healthier than deGrom. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Granted, he is a lot younger. This is going to be deGrom's age 35 season versus Rodon's age 30 season. But deGrom has a shorter history of injuries than Rodon. Rodon has had injuries for a lot of years, has missed a decent portion of a lot of years, versus deGrom, who has missed a decent portion of both of the last 2 years. So it's kind of what have you done for me lately? And, you know, even when deGrom has had those injury plague seasons the last 2 years, he's still been phenomenal. He's still been phenomenal when he came off of the injured list and pitched this season. I mean, this year he was really darn good. He didn't pitch until August 2nd, but his very first game, he went 5 innings, struck out 6, and only allowed 1 run. Granted, it was against the Nationals, but, you know, still really darn good. The next game he came out against the Braves, struck out 12, only gave up 2 runs in 5 2/3 innings on a limited pitch count there as well. I think he only threw, 76 pitches, got him through 5 2/3 innings with 12 strikeouts against the Braves, who won the NL East last year. In his second start off the IL, the guy was absolutely dominant. In his last start, he went 6 innings, did allow 3 runs, ended up getting the loss against the Braves in a crucial series late, but he did strike out 11 in that game. Only allowed 5 hits, but 3 of those went over the fence, and so that will be tough to win a lot of games. But he was really, really effective when he was on this year, did have a 3 ERA. I think his best game of the season probably was when he went and beat the Dodgers, only gave up the 1 run, 3 hits, struck out 9 in 7 innings against the Dodgers. This Dodgers team that won 100 bazillion games when he was, sixth game? This is his 6th game off the IL. Not even been a month that he had been fully healthy, and he was doing that to the freaking Dodgers. So this guy is the guy. He is the best pitcher in baseball. He has been phenomenal, and I think we are really, really overthinking it if you're saying, well, he's been kind of hurt, and I don't know if you want to give him 4 years. Give this guy 4 years, give him 5 years, give him all of the years, because he is downright phenomenal. I know that these injuries are worrisome, and let's look a little bit at what the projections are for him next year. So how healthy do these different projection systems think he is going to be? Well, if you're looking at Baseball Reference side, that is the more pessimistic of these projections. Right now, it is projecting him to have 101 innings pitched. They also project him for a save. I don't know what scenario Jacob deGrom is coming in for a save, and they do this a lot. I feel like I see this a lot with Baseball Reference. They randomly, all these like starting pitchers who have like started their entire careers, never, ever, 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 ever come out of the pen, which Looking, yeah, he has literally never pitched out of the bullpen in the regular season. So why on earth Baseball Reference is projecting him for a save, I don't freaking know. But they have him at 101 innings next year. If you look at Fangraphs and what they are projecting him to have, according to the Fangraphs and the Steamer, both of those have him, the FGDC, Fangraphs DC projection, and the Steamer, which are somehow different but also kind of similar. Anyway, both those have him at 168 innings next year. So I think that feels like a closer estimate. I think 100 is definitely on the pessimistic side, but I don't think it'll be fewer than 100 innings. I don't necessarily think that it'll be, all right, you're fully healthy, all the reins are off, we're going to throw you 200 innings next year. Maybe, best case scenario, that's what happens, and he goes back and wins a freaking Cy Young and looks like his old self again. I think that's a little too rosy on the rosy side, but it's definitely a possibility. It's not impossible for him to be perfectly healthy for a season, but I think somewhere in that 120 to 150-ish inning range is something that is likely and possible, which does mean the Rangers might need to make another move. Coming up, I'm going to render my verdict, give my official ruling of where I'm leaning today. Might change next week, but of where I'm leaning between these two top-of-the-market pitchers and what moves the Rangers might want to make to help themselves cover themselves if they do sign deGrom, who might have an injury. But first, this episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. If you thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Rangers listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year. You won't want to miss it. Here is why you'll love it. SimpliSafe was awarded the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, a third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get a priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. This is their biggest discount of the year, so you don't want to wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Now, if the Rangers are getting Jacob deGrom as their #1 starter, I think that is great. I think that should be the plan. I think there should be no reservation in that because he is so gosh darn good that any risks will be pretty well nullified by the rewards of having the best gosh darn pitcher in baseball on the mound once every 5 days for your team. But I think there is still something that the Rangers could do to kind of shore up their rotation, to kind of build up that depth. We saw what carried the Astros this year in the postseason all the way to a championship, unfortunately. It was depth of pitching. It was a very, very deep starting pitching staff. They had 3 really darn good starters, a 4th pretty good starter, and then some other guys in the bullpen that was just chock full of nasty, nasty dudes. Now, I think the Rangers have a pretty darn good bullpen. I don't think it's quite as good as the Astros. That's fine. The top end of their guys are really darn effective. We have seen how good their multi-inning relievers are if they can bring back Matt Moore and he can stop walking everybody and their mother and still keep striking everyone out. I think that would be fantastic. But even if they're just with Taylor Hearn and Brock Burke as their only long relief lefties, plus you have Jose Leclerc and Jonathan Hernandez in the back end, I think that's still a really darn good pen. But if the Rangers have deGrom as their #1 and they do view Martin Perez and John Gray as #3s-ish, then, well, you still need a #2. And I don't think they have the money to go spend for Rodon and a deGrom. And honestly, I don't think that they should, because having both those guys who do have the injury concerns, are really darn good when they're healthy, but do have the concerns, I think building rotation at the top end out of both those guys is a little bit worrisome. So I think the Rangers will be spending big on one starting pitcher and trading for another. And I think at this point, I'm leaning toward Corbin Burnes. I think that is the guy who you want to go with. You want to have a guy who is consistent, who you can count on to go 6 innings pretty much every day. Like it seems like Martin Perez has figured out how to do. Maybe it was pretty much every single start that he was going 6 innings or 7 innings or sometimes later on. And that's great. And that is awesome. And if you're having a sub 2 ERA while you're doing it, then that's absolutely freaking fantastic. That makes you a number 2 as opposed to a number 3. But having someone who can go take the hill, give you at least 5 innings, at the very least, but usually 6 and sometimes 7 or 8, that is what you want. And I think Corbin Burnes is what it would take to go and get that. Next year, he's projected by Baseball Reference to pitch 177 innings. Yeah, there we go. I see it again. They're projecting Corbin Burnes to have a save. Stop doing that, Baseball Reference. Stop projecting these starting pitchers to have a save. With Corbin Burnes, he at least has pitched in the bullpen, does have 2 saves in his career. Now, they came in 2018, 2019. He has been a starter for the most of the last 3 years. He did finish 2 games of the 12 he pitched in 2020, but he's a little bit on the younger side. So he's started the last 53 games that he has pitched in the big leagues. When he won his Cy Young, he averaged just under 6 innings per start. This year, he started 33 games, had a sub 3 ERA, finished 7th in Cy Young voting this year, but pitched 202 innings and led the league with 243 strikeouts. I think my projection on what it would take to get him was probably a little low. It's probably a little bit on the low end. I think I saw that 167 innings and forgot to contextualize it in that it was his first year as a full-time starter in the big leagues. Also, it was the first year of building back up after 2020 and not having the full season. So pitchers weren't going as deep into games, weren't pitching as long, but he did make 28 starts that year. And this year, again, finding guys that can go 180 innings or 200 innings is a lot more difficult than it used to be, especially the last couple of years, because again, like I just said, of finding guys who could build back up their stamina from not having the full season in 2020 going into 2021, and then having the shortened spring training that was probably murderous on a lot of starting pitchers this year. The guys who did go 200 or around 200 innings this year, really big tip of the cap to those guys. But that's a long-winded way of saying I think my trade package was a little short for what it would take to get Corbin Burnes, and I'm thinking now I'm leaning more towards him than I was Brandon Woodruff. I think maybe something in the prospect hall of like Ezekiel Duran. It might take Duran, Owen White, and Foscue, and I think maybe one other somewhere lower on down in there. Like a Dustin Harris. I don't know. It'd be a really tough package to give up, but you get a guy who has won a Cy Young. You have 2 Cy Young winners at the 1 and 2 in your rotation. And then you have, if John Gray is your number 4 in your rotation, that is a darn good starting rotation. One of the deeper ones in all of Major League Baseball. I don't know that it would be the absolute deepest in Major League Baseball, but I think it would be definitely way up there. And the top end would be as good as anybody. If Corbin Burnes is your number freaking 2, the guy who won a Cy Young in literally last year, that is a fantastic rotation. So I think that is where I am leaning at the moment for the deal for deGrom. I think where I would sign him at, let's look at what Spotrac says his market value is. This is a really hard one to place market value on. I've seen somewhere in the $41 million range. Spotrac says that his average annual salary is projected to be $45.1 million. They think the deal will be 3 years, $135 million. So literally $45 million for the next 3 years, which would be more than Max Scherzer got, which I don't know if that's likely. He's going to get more average annual value than Scherzer got. Scherzer at least has been healthy. I mean, Scherzer did miss some time this year, but for the last few years before he signed this deal, he had been really healthy and at Cy Young levels. Not that Jacob deGrom hasn't been at that, but he has missed some time the last couple of years, so I think that really, because he's missed time, that's, I think, the only reason why the Rangers, or frankly anyone else, is in this discussion. Because if he hasn't, then there's literally no way that the Mets ever let him leave or could get away with like even entertaining the possibility of him leaving, because he's your homegrown star, your 2-time Cy Young winner, or if he was healthy the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 times Cy Young winner, because he's just been that stupid good. But because that has been the case, because there has been some messing around with it, maybe he's like, all right, I am willing to consider going to Texas. He is not a Texas kid. He is a Florida kid, grew up in, I believe, Miami, or at least was born in Miami. Let's see. Yeah. Went to wherever Ormond Beach is. That's where he went to high school. Calvary Christian Academy in Ormond Beach, Florida, and also went to Stetson in DeLand, Florida. deGrom went to a college in DeLand. Just think that's a fun little note there. But anyway, I think that is a bit much on the 150 value. So I would go 4 years, $172 million. That is $43 million average annual value. I think that would be enough to blow anybody else out of the water. Maybe the Dodgers come in and out of nowhere and are like, hey, we're going to spend a lot of money because we're the freaking Dodgers and because we freaking can. And you want to come win? You come in with the Dodgers. We're not going to mess around with you. We have done a good job of keeping our, well, I was going to say we've done a good job of keeping our pitchers healthy. That hasn't really been the case for the Dodgers. But hey, you're going to have a whole bunch of offense. You know, you're not going to have all these games that you had in 2021 and other years where, you know, you throw 9 innings, give up 1 run, and then get the loss. He's kind of saddled with the Yu Darvish Rangers era run support of just like, all right, we're just not going to score when you're on the mound because we don't have to because, you know, as long as we get 1 run across the board, then like that should be enough to win most days when deGrom's on the hill. Well, the Dodgers, they have a pretty good offense and a pretty good team, but I think that they have other priorities to money whip, possibly Aaron Judge, definitely I think one of the shortstop, whichever one, and deGrom is more of a luxury item where like, oh, if he's still around and no one's ponied up, then they can come throw some money. But I don't think most teams are going to be willing to go more than 3 years. I think the Rangers, by being desperate, and I think desperate in a good way, could win the bid to get him on that 4-year deal. I don't think there'll be any caveats on it. I don't think there'll be a player option because if you give him 4 years, like, all right, you're staying for the whole 4 years. If you end up being really good for these entire years, we don't want to give you an opt-out so you could possibly go sign somewhere else. We want to get the entire value of it. And I think that deGrom would be okay with that. He had a player option this year that he took because he has not made more than $20 million any year in his career somehow. He's going to be 35 next year. He's won 2 Cy Youngs. He's never made more than $20 million. That's nuts. So he is looking to get freaking paid and paid big. And if the Rangers do give him that contract, that would put the Rangers at $151 million of their payroll. And at this point, this is, again, before anybody's really signed any big deals. I mean, the Angels have signed their one player from Tyler Anderson from the Dodgers to a 3-year, $13 million deal, which, by the way, a report came out that they offered that 3-year, $39 million deal to Perez, and he decided to turn it down and sign back with the Rangers on that 1-year, $19.65 million qualifying offer, which is nice because I would have been really freaking pissed off if Martin Perez went to the Angels and shoved there. But we've seen former Rangers go to the Angels and not do so good after getting decent-sized contracts. But anyway, that would put the Rangers at 4th in payroll rankings. They would be right behind the New York Yankees. They would be behind the Braves and behind the Mets. Right now, the Mets are number 1 at $184 million. That's before they've signed Nimmo or deGrom or anybody else, which I think they will make some moves. The Braves are $162 million. I don't see them adding a whole bunch of money. Maybe they add like 25 to 30 million for a shortstop, or maybe they let one of their rookies play shortstop. I don't know what they do with that, but I don't see them going over that $200 million threshold. The Yankees, I have to sign Aaron Judge. So they're going to go way up there right now. I think the Padres could pass the Rangers, but that's still, I think this would be right around where the Rangers would be. Maybe I projected like maybe 160 million is kind of the top end of what the Rangers would spend. So this would give them, you know, around $8-9 million to play with. And that is enough for one of the cheaper end left fielders if they wanted to go get one of those guys, like Joey Gallo or Adam Duvall or someone in kind of that money range. Or if they just want to stick it out with what they've got, if they don't want to add a bat, then I think that's fine. I think you have, Ezekiel Duran in left field, and or maybe it's Bubba and you have Leote in center field, and I think you're pretty fine. I think that's still a pretty good group, but that is where I am landing with these Rangers. So yes, my official ruling as of today, subject to change, is my ideal offseason is go sign deGrom to stupid money, go trade a painful amount of prospects for Corbin Burnes, then have your 3-4 be Martin Perez, John Gray, and your number 5 be one of Jake Odorizzi, Dane Dunning, or who knows, maybe Cole Reagan surprises and dominates and makes the rotation out of camp. Who knows? Anything is possible. If the Rangers are in the conversation for Jacob deGrom, which the fact that they're even in the conversation makes me over the freaking moon, I think you'd have to be pretty foolish to let this opportunity slip away, because the Rangers are in a great, great place if they do sign deGrom. They do trade for one of those top tier starting pitchers that are reportedly on the market. I think that would make the Rangers legitimate playoff contenders and maybe even AL West contenders. But that's going to do it for this week's editions of Locked On Rangers. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing all week. Had lots of good stuff next week. Don't know exactly what I'll be getting into. Maybe there'll be some news that breaks over the weekend while I'm working, probably, knowing my luck. So keep your eyes peeled to the hot stove, onto Twitter, notifications from Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, as long as Twitter still exists, or if that dies, then I don't know, maybe look out your window for some smoke signals. But thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.